Okay, so the third and final study tip I'd like to share with you here surrounds the information in Chapter 4, which we have already been dealing with in this chapter. But the idea of making your local color not just literally one color, but integrating different hues and temperatures while still maintaining the appearance of a singular color. Now, you know what? The fastest way to practice this is actually to do this little exercise that I showed you in the chapter itself. That is, find photographs of different materials in real life and just sample them and paint their various colors. By keeping an eye on what the color wheel is doing as you sample, that'll help ingrain certain movements into your brain, which you can then pull out later as you work, say, from imagination. But in order to bridge the gap toward working from imagination, we can take inspiration from another artist. Say this painting by Greg Manches. I'm looking at that four-armed monster there, and anyone can tell you that he is green. Yet look at all the colors that are decidedly not green on there. So what I've done is I've cropped the Greg Manches painting just so it appears as abstract colors. And typically I don't like to work on pure white, so I'll just block myself in some kind of neutral environment, this grayish sort of thing, and we can get going from here. We're going to use a sphere again, as we do in these studies. I feel like painting basic forms like spheres is kind of par for the course with so many fine art things and illustration things. It's just great for practice, because again, you don't have to think about the drawing so much. So you know what? I'll do that thing where I block the sphere in the wrong color, quote unquote. We want the sphere to appear green later, but I'll make it red to start with. In the original Manches painting, we can see some areas that are reddish. That's more of an orangey thing, and I could use orange if I wanted to, put those in. But we'll see if I can retain some of those colors as I now add the green. Now, while I do want this to have a light source, what I want to try and do now is paint it without the influence of light. So I'll grab my smudge tool maybe, and when I use my smudge tool, I like to turn finger painting on, which allows me to paint with the color I have selected. And I'll go right into my greens and say, all right, it's kind of an earthy green tone like this. And let's just start laying in these greens, moving that red toward the green. This is where the smudge tool is nice because it kind of feels like almost like a wet oil impasto brush or something. Other apps have actually better impasto brushes than this, like Corel Painter is known for its natural media brushes. And even apps like Procreate really do a good job with this stuff. Krita as well. And Photoshop to a certain degree. Although honestly, this is not Photoshop's strength. But Photoshop does work well if you can find the right brush to use with the smudge tool. I've got this kind of flat brush here. I believe this brush is one of Kyle Webster's impasto brushes that comes with a subscription of Photoshop CC, which I obviously own, so that's what I'm using. And obviously I can't share that brush with you because it's not my property to include it with my material. But if you have a subscription to Photoshop, you can access Kyle Webster's Impasto Kit, which is where this brush is from again. All right, so you can see I'm just moving around my hues, wiggling them around. This is more of a yellow-green. I have some cooler greens behind it. And look at those reds, those warms that are just peeking through now in the background. Let's try some bluer greens. Let's go way up here. And again, that's such a big shift, this bluer green. So I'm going to keep it gray. That's a great way to integrate colors. If you're shy about it, is just keep it gray at first. And then as you build confidence with those grays by sort of harmonizing what's there, then you can maybe add a bit of saturation as you go. And I think I'm accidentally painting a light source. Let's make sure I apply these colors, throughout. I don't want this ball to appear to have light on it right now, because I don't want to repeat the study I just did, which is the light and shadow spheres integrated into the photograph. I want this to be more of a flat color study. But once I'm done, say when I'm at this level, I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, that reads as green. Yet, just like the Greg Manches monster painting here, there are many colors in there that really aren't green. In fact, let's add a few more. Like I see some touches of purple in the Manches painting. Let's make sure it's very grayed off. Maybe a bit more blue than that. Maybe it's actually a bit more like this kind of purple. Put some of those in and see where you can push the limits. Like how much of that purple can you put in before it starts not looking green? Like if I did this, now suddenly it's no longer a green ball, right? But if you are mindful of how you're mixing those colors, soft edges, even this rake style brush will create its own version of soft edges if you push lightly enough. And then of course the smudge tool can literally create soft edges. And then there's also tools like the airbrush that I have up here can create soft edges. You'd be amazed at how much color you can get into a little local color study like this and still have it, in this case, read as a green ball. Okay, so now let's simply add some light to this. I'll grab a airbrush set to linear dodge mode, which I have bookmarked in my brushes here, because it's a mode that I use a lot. And you see where this monster is lit by the sunlight? It's kind of a warmer green. So I'll pick a warmer color here. And with linear dodge, you actually have to pick darker colors because it adds it like that. And then what I'll do is I'll just put this in. And the nice thing about laying in my local colors first and having all those color vibrations built in is now when I add this light layer with linear dodge mode, or you can use color dodge mode or screen mode, they do very similar things, it preserves all of that work I did underneath. And now I feel like we have a three-dimensional ball with all those color vibrations, those hue varieties, lit by an actual light source. I could go the opposite way and flip this over to multiply mode, maybe get a cooler color. And with multiply, you go pick a lighter color because it's going to darken it. And I can just maybe increase the contrast in the shadows and get this ball popping its form a little bit more, you know. Change those colors as I work. And again, multiply mode, very much like linear dodge mode, will preserve all that color work I did underneath. And this study is decidedly not pretty. I mean, there's a halo of light around here that I can just paint away, but it doesn't matter. You know, don't think you're posting these to your Instagram account or anything. Again, these are things you do over a cup of morning coffee, and you are just trying to familiarize your brain and your eye with how colors are moving around on this all-important digital color picker. You know, this class is mostly targeted towards digital painters, even though the color theories are fully applicable to traditional artists as well. When we work digitally, we have to abide by this color picker. We don't mix our pigments like a traditional oil painter does, for example. And picking colors is tricky because it's tempting to want to pick the exact color you want to paint with. What I'm showing you here, especially in this example, is that's not really what you do. Or at least another option is you mix colors on the actual canvas and you arrive at the colors visually. That is, you evaluate them visually, not necessarily picking that color and saying, oh, that's the right color. It's more like you can pick that color and then mix toward it by pressing softly with your brush or something. And you have the influence of that color on, you know, an overall area. All right, and if we wanted to add a little shadow here, I could just pick a neutral cold color or something. And, you know, if it's a warm light, it might cast a cooler shadow and just do something like this. Again, this one is decidedly less pretty than the last one, but that's okay. I'm doing that on purpose because I want to encourage you to get in these reps. And I feel like perfectionism and too much quality can sometimes hurt that. I'm never saying you should abandon quality entirely, like this has quality to it, but it's by no means a polished painting of a sphere. However, I feel like the colors I just captured there, and this took me, 5 minutes, would be extremely valuable if I wanted to paint something as complex as this monster in the original Manchess painting. Or maybe one of my own green monsters, which is exactly how I go about painting this guy. And it's not a coincidence that that monster is very close to a sphere. Okay, so let's pull this key up from chapter 5, and I just want to show you one more thing. Don't be afraid to blobify things. This whole study tips chapter I've been talking about basically eliminating the drawing as much as you can. Well, why not simplify this study even more and do it in spherical form? The only thing I'll do differently here is add a few more spheres to flesh out the scene. And I'll pick some of the major colors in there. You can see the jacket tones, the flesh tones, the bandana red tones. And I'm just kind of taking some inspiration as to where those objects lie. You know, that sphere farthest back, which represents the boy at the far end, does need to be a bit darker than the boy closer up. And you can see my two spheres represent that. That's important to me in this piece because you don't want those figures just clumping together as one mass. You do want some separation there. That's what Rockwell did in his painting anyway, and I liked that. Even though they're wearing the same colored clothing, they separate from each other via value difference. And in this one, because the boy at the bottom and the dog are kind of so separate from everything else, I'm not even going to include them in this version of the study. If I can get those top blobs working, all I gotta do is replicate those decisions for the bottom, and it'll work out just fine. Studying sometimes can involve creative simplification of your subject. And again, this is specific to color study. I mean, it's kind of similar to how we study drawing, right? When we study drawing, we eliminate color. So when we study color, why not eliminate as much drawing as possible? Now that newly freed up creative bandwidth can all be focused at your color selections. Then yeah, I think I'll end that one there, and I'll also end chapter 6 here. And by extension, this is the end of the class. I want to thank you for watching the Color Survival Guide. I really hope this class has given you some valuable insight and lessons and tools that will ultimately help you propel your color use to that next level. After all, I do think color can be a very logical thing. It surely can feel scary at first, but with the help of tools such as the ones in this class, I have confidence that you'll be able to make more sense of it. Alright folks, this is Marco Bucci signing off. I'll see you in another class. Happy studying!